Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show Inclusive. In this series of dialogues, we are going to discuss about the trends on inclusive development in Pakistan. Particularly, we are going to interview those people and organizations who are contributing in the mainstreaming of disabled persons in the society. Today, we are going to discuss about the employment opportunities for persons with disabilities, or how we can have inclusive employment opportunities for the disabled people in Pakistan. And we are very much privileged to have Dr. Caven Mcloughlin with us from the Kent State University. He is visiting Pakistan as a Fulbright specialist, and we are honored that he has been awarded committee on the president for his book Getting Employed and Staying Employed. Welcome, Dr. Caven, to the show.
Thank you very much, Atif.
Dr. Caven, coming rightly to the topic, like how the United States has introduced or created job market for persons with disabilities, and what were the challenges?
Well, you've asked me to cast my mind back about 30 to 40 years. And as with everything that's important in life, timing is everything. And at that point, it wasn't a matter of government creating jobs, it was much more a matter of workplace matching. Because at the time there was a shortage of people well prepared to take important positions in business, industry, commerce, in retail businesses, and in hospitality work, in virtually everything. And what happened is the call came from the employers for the personnel. And what the thrust was at the time was workplace preparation, not job creation, but workplace preparation for those people who were to take the positions. And as a consequence, it happened quite naturally. And as soon as it began happening, then government joined in and created a small, but at the time, significant tax incentive for employers who chose to employ persons with disabilities in their normal run of things. And so those two features together, along with a mindset change that was occurring at about the same time about the value of all people in the community, all in combination made it possible for people with disabilities to naturally slide into positions in the workplace, work alongside abled folk. And so it was a combination of differently abled and abled people working alongside for the common good.
Dr. Caven, as you mentioned that there were some challenges at the beginning, like in Pakistan, people with disabilities are facing all kinds of discrimination coupled with the environmental barriers. So I'm sure that they have done something from the policy side or from the corporate sector, the private sector, how they have came out to bridge this gap of accessibility, or like how they bridge these barriers.
You identified the problem in twofold. The first one that I'll address is the accessibility. You're right. Yeah. Accessibility, particularly for people with mobility limitations, is a critical variable that makes it possible for people to actually get to their place of work, to do that in an efficient fashion and in a safe fashion. And it did take governmental intrusion into the workplace to develop those changes. But if you're talking about something, well, let's use the example ramps, so as to get into a building, you only have to make those once. But the other issue that you mentioned is one that has to be made again and again and again. It's generational, and this is the issue of stigma. As people grow into their young years, they don't understand what it means to be a person with limitations of any kind, and they can be cruel and hurtful and demonstrate a lack of understanding. But in time, with maturity, with wisdom, with age, comes an appreciation of the value in all people. And so, yes, education has to continue for all of the citizenry about the worth and value of people with disabilities, just like it does for the worth and value of people without disabilities. It's a social justice issue. And I believe that needs addressing in a permanent fashion, unlike, for example, having to redo the ramp every year. It's not necessary.
Okay. Who are the key actors or the stakeholders who can be helpful to create a job market or inclusive market for persons with disabilities? For example, as you mentioned in the first thing, that the government and the companies or the private sector, they have worked together side by side.
Yes.
But who are the other factors, like for example, who is going to pay the additional cost of management of disability or bringing them out of the house? So who are the key stakeholders who can play their role for enhancing the workability of disabled persons?
Well, that's a big question, and of course it takes multiple targets to find a solution to all of that. Let me try to address a couple of those as I go along and see where it develops. First of all, not every person with a disability is equivalent in terms of their abilities with all other persons with disabilities. Some can advocate well for themselves, and some have limitations in communication which restrict their ability to advocate for themselves. And so for those people who can advocate on their own behalf, largely they are the stakeholder that makes it possible to find employment. Now, I want to stress the point that workplace readiness is a critical prerequisite for making a strong match which will last through time. It only takes one employer to find that they've got a potential employee stream to make it possible to begin a thread of employment in that business. So the first step is readying the person with a disability for potential employment, workplace preparation. The business world too has got incentives because of their brand and their identity themselves to appear and to be inclusive. And we're talking about businesses that sell to everybody or serve everybody, not just that slice of the population with ability, but too people with disability. And it's to their business interest and to their credit when they can find a slot for a person with a disability and do that without providing charity. Not necessary.
Okay. And one component which is missing here in our discussion is the coaching. Like people with disabilities has to be prepared for this job market to compete in the environment. So what do you suggest on that?
Well, we all have to be prepared for the job market. I'm sure people watching now know that it took them years to prepare themselves for the job market, and it will take people with disabilities an equivalent amount of time to develop the right dispositions, the right skill set, the right approach to the longer work day, and in all ways to acquaint themselves with what's needed.
Yeah, actually in Pakistan, people with disabilities are still struggling a fight of acceptance. They are being discriminated at large. So they have to prepare themselves to be part of this competitive environment and then compete for these jobs in the market available by government or corporate sector.
Yes.
So have you started some coaching programs or some specific exclusive thing? Like, as you mentioned, it is important, equally important for everyone, but is there any specific program for disabled persons which coach them to prepare for their career?
Yes. My follow-up book to the one that you mentioned earlier is in fact called Job Coaching, and what it describes is a partnership between a person skilled in understanding what it takes to be successful in the workplace, and then use that knowledge along with the natural qualities and abilities within the person with limitations to find a way to develop for them all that is needed in any particular job. And it doesn't matter if this job is in the hospitality world, in food service, in secretary. I could label all of the work, because all it needs is somebody who has a sense of what is required and a willingness to coach, advocate, and to be candidly forward with the person with the disability so that they develop all of the skills that are necessary. Now, people with disabilities, typically because of their lifetime experience with stigma and, as you pointed out, the other people's negative opinions, generally have developed a sense of resilience, and so this works to their advantage.
Good, thank you. Actually, it's a twin-track approach. We can see that people with disabilities have to be prepared themselves, and on the other side, the corporate sector and the job market need to be acceptable for person with disabilities at the same time. Dr. Caven, in the United States, you have mentioned the best examples, and it took a long time. But in Pakistan, as you have seen, that people with disabilities are still uncounted population. The social protection system is not that strong as in the US. So what do you advise, keeping in view the economic and social conditions of the country? You have been here, you have met some in academia in Pakistan, so you have seen the economic conditions. What do you suggest, or what do you advise to the corporate sector to create a better job market or inclusive job market for people with disabilities in Pakistan?
Many of the larger corporations that are providing services or selling goods, or in some way are serving a general public, have got an eye to the world outside of Pakistan. And they, generally speaking, understand the value that inclusion brings to their brand or their identity. It carries them to a different level in the pecking order when it comes to looking at them by comparison with other companies. So generally speaking, the problem isn't in getting the business to take on board people with disabilities. Generally speaking, the problem is to properly acquaint, prepare, and job prepare the person with a disability for a workplace home with that larger corporation. Again, I'm talking about a partnership here between an employer and an employee. And I suppose what I'm really saying is that often the employer is a few steps ahead of the employee. So my experience has been that the marriage of employee to employer works best when investment occurs in job preparation, in readiness preparation for that employment. Simply getting the job labeled is not enough. Preparing the person to take that job, and here's the important thing, be successful in that job, is the critical venture.
Yes, it seems that we have to go a long way to mobilize the human resources with disabilities in Pakistan, but we are confident that we are going in the right direction, as I have seen from your discussion. The debate has been started and people are coming out of their houses to get a better job, and corporate sector is stepping forward. So we are looking forward to have an inclusive environment in future in Pakistan. Thank you very much, Dr. Caven, for joining us. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. You've got a bright future in front of you, as have all people with disabilities in Pakistan. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Caven, for joining us today, and see you in the next episode with new ideas on the inclusive development. Thank you very much.